guys, welcome back to the United Star. We've got John Shin again with us. John, it was a pleasure having you on last time, and it's a pleasure having you on again. Thanks so much for coming on.
No, always a pleasure to have a great conversation about Manchester United with fans all over the world. And I think people from the UK need to understand Manchester United is a massive club in its own right. There's fans all over the world, and I'm always glad to speak with anybody from anywhere, any part of the world when it comes to Manchester United.
Exactly. Thanks. Fantastic. So, John, getting straight into it, currently things are looking pretty peachy at Old Trafford. We've signed probably the most promising young wingers in world football in Jadon Sancho. Obviously, we wanted him for a very long time now, and that's clear. We've signed probably the most experienced defender you could get for a 28-year-old in Rafa Varane. He's won everything there is. He's won the World Cup, four Champions Leagues, La Liga titles. So he's very experienced. He's played along with some of the best players in the world. What do you think about this window? It's surprising because this is not a Glazers sort of transfer window. What's happened here?
I think first of all, first things first, like you mentioned, I think the word peachy is perfect. I think it's an apt term because it is a fantastic transfer window by any means of imagination for any Manchester United fan. Just the fact that we were able to finally sign Jadon Sancho, regardless of the fee. Look, the money is money. At the end of the day, if we're going to sign somebody that's going to be a long-term investment, somebody who's clearly has the potential in Jadon Sancho, that kind of money, it'll pay in its investment in long term. So Jadon Sancho is fantastic, and like you mentioned, Rafael Varane, another proven winner. And look, he's still he's not old, but he's not an old center back. He's still 28. He's got a fantastic career ahead of him, and to be able to join Manchester United, and it relatively in his peak. I mean, that's a fantastic window. Now, is it surprising? Yes. I mean, like you just mentioned, since David Moyes, we had to sign. We've struggled in the window. We thought that we were going to change things around once we signed Pogba. Struggled a little bit again, lost direction, and we thought we were going to fix things up when we bought Lukaku. Struggled again. There wasn't really a sense of direction. But for the first time, I could truly say, I honestly feel like there is a bit of direction with this transfer activity. Do I think it's one of those things where it's a one-off circumstance where we're just going to buy a bunch of players this season and not buy anything next season? Who knows? Nobody knows. I think it's very important that we keep very low expectations with respect to Glazers. But just to kind of cap off on the point, it's unusual, but it's not all that unusual if you think about what just recently happened, the events that transpired with respect to the Super League, all the chaos that ensued. I think the fans really did put a number on these owners. And look, at the end of the day, it's money, it's capitalism. These owners, Glazers, Kroenke, whoever the hell the ownership is, they're going to want to make money. And they obviously felt like the Super League was the way to go. And when they realized that the fan base was completely against this idea, they had to figure out a way to win them back. And if this is a way for them to try and win something back, I'll take it. I'm not saying that I'm all for Glazers and all that, but if this is their way of showing some sort of investment, I'll take it. If they need to, if they can continue to do this, why not?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a very valid point that for the first time in a lot of seasons, we're seeing some sort of direction with our transfer activity, because all seasons before, I don't remember us having identified the positions that we need to upgrade and getting in those players, getting in our number one targets, number two targets. I think this time we've identified that we need a right winger. Obviously, we've needed a right winger since I think Cristiano Ronaldo left our team, but we needed one right winger. We needed a centre back, a pacey centre back, an experienced centre back to partner Harry Maguire to play a sort of higher line. And I think that's been done. But now I think the midfield is still a bit of an issue. What do you think? Do you think we will go for a midfielder? And do you think it's an issue, firstly?
Actually, before we even go on to the midfield, I just want to talk a little bit more and just kind of supplement what I was saying before. We talked about how we were talking about the direction. We thought that we had direction when we signed Mkhitaryan. We thought we had direction when we picked up players like Lindelof and Bailly, right? We needed central defenders. We picked them up. We needed a right winger, attacking midfielder by trade in Mkhitaryan. But these players weren't the level of caliber that like Jadon Sancho and Rafael Varane. So I think for fans that might be questioning why we said that there's a sense of direction now, it seems like there is a sense of direction because of the signings that we've made, and now just to kind of, go back to the focal point with respect to the midfield. Midfield is still a position that's essential. I really strongly believe that we need a midfielder. We thought Pogba was going to be the signing that was going to replace Paul Scholes, and we realized that we still not replaced Paul Scholes. We thought that Angel Di Maria, who the hell did we sign? We saw Antonio Valencia. The list goes on. We thought that there was going to be so many players that was just going to just come in and try to get a job done, not to replace Cristiano Ronaldo, but at least get a job done. But we've not properly addressed areas ever in terms of the spine. We never had a clean spine, and now we seem to be having some sort of a clean spine. And that midfield, that defensive midfield position is what's going to solidify this spine. And as much as I love Matic and as much as I love what he's been doing for us over the years, the man's leg's gone. I mean, he's an old guy. And as much as I still love him, we can't rely on that kind of player to solidify that position. Pogba is not a six by trade. And we've seen the liability that is Paul Pogba when he does play in the six, whether it be a double pivot or a single pivot. So we still need a defensive midfielder to really solidify that role. And some people are like, John, chill out. Fred is the answer. McTominay is the answer. No, they are not the answer. I'm so sorry, but they are not the answer. I love Fred. I think he's absolutely hilarious. I love McTominay and what he stands as a Scottish youth player, just like absolutely trucking it at like a young boy, just looking like a tank. I love them. I love their idea, but we need an established defensive midfielder. And I think that's going to complete the spine. So just to answer your question, going all the way back, yes, we still need a midfielder.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very valid point that I think McTominay and Fred, like you said, I really love them as United players. I love the passion that McTominay has for the team, and Fred too, though his work rate is fantastic. But I think they both have their little flaws. And I would love to see them as squad players. I would love to see them on the bench, ready to come on for as subs in the 80th minute, or just to put in some freshness in the team. But I wouldn't necessarily want them to start week in, week out for my team. And just to talk about your midfield, who is your ideal midfielder that we'll get? Because we've been linked with a lot of midfielders, but none of them are the ideal CDM or the number 6 role. It's Saul and Camavinga. They're all, the number 8-ish mold. Who do you think we'll get, and who is your ideal signing?
Right. So I just to, I guess, to lay down the foundation for the conversation, you mentioned two names, Camavinga, and you mentioned Saul as well. Yeah. There was also Declan Rice, also a name being tossed around in the mix. And you're spot on. I don't think they're classic number 6s by trade. They're all, and to make things even more interesting, if you will, they all are very different in terms of their playing style. Yeah. And they're all at different stages in their career. I think Declan Rice and Camavinga and Saul are three fantastic players, but they're all different players in terms of their stage of their careers. Yeah. So do I think any of them fits the classic 6 that we need as Manchester United right now? To be quite honest with you, no. I honestly think maybe a player like maybe somebody like Ndidi, maybe even like a Kante, who's not even a classic 6, but somebody like a Kante or an Ndidi might be a bit more suitable or a bit more required for Manchester United to complete that 11 right now. However, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember somebody saying that like Ndidi was like a ridiculous price and Kante is not even available in the market. And that's why Camavinga and Rice and Salah are the names mentioned. But if I had to pick between them three, it'll be a tough choice between Camavinga and Saul. Don't get me wrong. I love Declan Rice, and I think what he's doing for West Ham and we saw what he did for England was fantastic, and he's a quality player. But given the fact that he's a Premier League player, he's going to cost a bang and a buck. It's going to be very, very expensive, and we already spent that kind of money on Jadon Sancho and Rafael Varane. And I'm not the one spending the cash, but it's still going to be a lot of cash. And if we can utilize that money elsewhere, I'd rather spend that on a Saul or a Camavinga. Now, between them two is the real question: is where do we give here. Sal is obviously a much more established player he's a veteran player. He's been playing for a solid team under a solid manager in Simeone. Whereas Camavinga, he's still a young prospect. He's a quality player, but if you look at it from a monetary investment perspective, I guess Camavinga becomes a bit more of a gamble. This is where I might get a bit of flack, but I think we would probably be safer playing that money in Sal. And here's why. We spent that money and we've given that youthful chance in Jadon Sancho, in Rashford, in a lot of the youngsters that we already have in the squad. Luke Shaw is still a young player. Aaron Wan-Bissaka is still a young player. So we still have a lot of youth everywhere, but we need an established spine. And what Sal can bring is solidity right in front of that pocket between Maguire and Varane, and just be able to shuttle in between, whether it be as a box to box, as an 8 or a 6, whatever the position, whatever the number. We know what he can bring to the table in terms of solidarity in that midfield. And that in turn allows players like Pogba and Bruno Fernandes to roam around and freely, spread their wings out wide. And I think that's what we need.
Yeah, and I also think that Saul is a little, like as you mentioned, he's played under Simeone, so, and he's Spanish, so they generally a more technical player. So it might be a little easier for him to transition into a number 6 role. As for Camavinga, who's still an 18-year-old, let's not forget that. And if we're expecting him to play as the number 6 for United as an 18-year-old, it's a little too much pressure, I feel, to expect banging performances week in, week out from an 18-year-old.
Right. And I think certain people need to understand that, like, this is Manchester United. This is the Premier League. This is one of the greatest clubs in one of the greatest leagues in the world. It's not easy just for an 18-year-old to just come in Boston. He don't get me wrong. He might have the potential to do so, but there's so much different factors involved in the world of football now that a club to rely on an 18-year-old to produce that kind of outcome is too difficult. It's way too even when Sir Alex Ferguson was still managing. One of the reasons why Paul Pogba left was because he thought he was going to be the defensive or whatever midfielder that was going to come in and play his role, but instead Sir Alex Ferguson decided to play Jason Park and Fabio in midfield because he couldn't rely on a 16 or 17-year-old Pogba to do that, right? It's not uncommon for these things to happen. It's okay that it's okay that we shouldn't rely on an 18-year-old to play that role. And that's, like you just mentioned, I think that point about Spanish players usually possessing that technical ability, I think that's a fantastic point. And I think that's what even further reinforces my point in that bringing somebody like Salah is definitely probably the right choice in this current market. If we're going for an A+ in the grade for transfer market, that's the player we need to go for.
Right. And I'm so happy you mentioned Paul Pogba, because any conversation about Manchester United cannot be complete without having mentioned what is the contract situation with Pogba. Is he going to stay? And do you want him to stay? Do you think he is? Because now, let's face it, if he signs the new deal at United, this is his final main contract, like his professional contract. He's 28. If he signs a 4-year deal, he's going to be 32 by the time he's done with the contract. And I think that shows a lot of commitment. That's Pogba committing to the United plan for sure, because it's his peak. He's in his peak right now, and he's going to remain at United. Do you want him to sign though? Because there's a lot. It's not only the footballer Paul Pogba that you're signing. It's a lot of stuff going on around him.
Look, I'm one of those guys. I don't know if people listening or watching know who I am, but I'm one of the guys that will die on the hill when it comes to Paul Pogba. I love everything that is Paul Pogba. I know he's had his fair share of wrongdoings with respect to the club and what he's done. Look, don't get me wrong. Nobody's perfect. But that being said, as much as I want Paul Pogba to stay, I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to make a move. You mentioned his age, 28. He's not a young player. I mean, he's not old, but like you mentioned, the next big contract is going to really determine his peak moments of his career. And then after that, it might just go downhill. Who knows? It's a crucial moment in Paul Pogba's career. And Paul Pogba is not just a player that, he's not really just, look, no player in this day and age is all about this like blind loyalty, right? They have to worry about their own brand, their own image, their own sponsorship deals. They have all these things that they have to worry about. And Paul Pogba is a superstar in that respect. He's managed by one of the most difficult get your money, man. Get your money agents in Mino Raiola. He's got a tough camp around him. He's got two brothers that won't shut up. It's a difficult camp to deal with. And the years that he's been at Manchester United, it was filled with hope and promise. But like we've touched up on earlier on in the conversation, there have been so many bad judgment calls from Manchester United's perspective with respect to dealing with Paul Pogba. If I'm a Manchester United back then, if I spent 80 million on a player that I sold for 800K, I'm building my team around Paul Pogba. Yeah. I'm building this team. I'm signing players that fit his bill, fit his agenda, fit his style, and I'm building it around them. But what do? We were disjointed. We signed a couple of players that didn't look like they had any sort of purpose, and then we just went around another window, not really doing much, and then we sold one, and it had to. We were all over the place. There was no real direction in the 10-year plan. The plan was so disjointed, and it came at Paul Pogba's expense, the way I see it. It came at Paul Pogba's expense. And look, a relationship works both ways. And I use this reference all the time. I say the relationship with Paul Pogba and Manchester United is that of a couple that needs to break up because they've been fighting for too much. Too many harsh words have been said. They've hurt each other's feelings way too much. And it's best that they just move on their separate ways. Me, I'm one of those like hopeless romantics that I would love for him to stay and continue his career. But I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be mad, quite frankly, if he left because of the circumstances that Paul Pogba found himself at Manchester United. And some people are like, John, you're giving him too much credit. You're protecting him too much. I'm not saying that he was an angel in this situation. He's made plenty of mistakes on his own and he's been liability. He's been many times a liability as a player that needs to be a solid player on that pitch. So look, he's had his fair share of wrongdoings just as much as Manchester United. So if he leaves, I'm not mad at it. But if he's gonna leave, we better identify that now and sell him so that we can make that profit. If he goes on a free, oh my God, we will go chase down whoever had to deal with this deal because we sold him for 800K, bought him for 80 mil, and then let him leave on a free. My goodness, the media will have a field day if that happens.
Yeah, it would be pretty ridiculous to let him go for free a second time of asking. But I mean, I think I wouldn't be too surprised because that's how I'm used to with the United board. It would be some normalcy being restored because after having such a great summer window, we'll have seen Pogba leave on a free again. So that would just neutralize it. Moving on to the formation. Now, there's a lot of rumors around Oli being inclined to switch into a 4-3-3. With Bruno in the team, do you think it'll be a viable option for him to play in a three-man midfield? How do you think that'll work out?
One of the things that I always stress is that fans shouldn't get so stuck up on this idea of formation. Formation on paper is a shape that gives us a bit of a background as to what we're looking at. But when we're on the pitch, it's very fluid and very multi-dimensional. The players move in different pockets of spaces to cover each other when they advance, when they defend throughout the thirds, the transition, different phases. The 4-3-3 might be 4-3-3 by paper, but it might look completely different when they're actually in motion, right? But with respect to maybe answering your question about Oli saying he might want to change to 4-3-3, will it fit Bruno's preference? Who knows? We've seen Bruno in a 4-2-3-1 flourish in that 10 role. He's sitting in that pocket between the three midfield and then the forward and in front. But do I think he'll be able to flourish in a 4-3-3? I would like to think so. I think real true quality players are able to play in any shape. That's just the way I see it. I think real quality players are able to have a multitude of functionality on the pitch, and whether that be in a midfield three, whether that be in an inverted diamond, whether that be an inverted triangle with a 6 and a 2 with two midfielders, or the other way around with two pivots, and then whatever the shape may be, I believe that if we play in a 4-3-3, I think Bruno will be given the opportunity and will quite honestly flourish in whatever role. He's proven to me, at least in last season, that he has the capabilities. He's one of those players that's like, if you play football, he's one of those players that if you're in his team, he's the most annoying guy on the team. He's constantly just yapping he's just going off on you. but he performs and he shows with his results. And those are the kind of players that you can trust. If somebody's just kind of constantly yapping at you with no end product, then you turn around and you just all kind of expletives. You just cuss at him and you tell him to stop. But Bruno Fernandes has shown to us that he can provide and he can show and he can produce. So in a 4-3-3, we've seen Jack Grealish do that for England, right? Whatever the position he plays for Aston Villa, we've seen Jack Grealish play in a multitude of positions. And I'm not saying that Jack Grealish is Bruno Fernandes, but what I'm trying to say is that whatever the shape, if we can fit the proper system where it benefits the entire 11, then so be it. 4-3-3 sounds fantastic, especially if we can sign somebody like Asal, put him in that 6, let them sort of shape into a back 3 with Maguire and Varane, and then the fullbacks can push up. If I have my whiteboard, then I can show you a little bit better. But if the fullbacks can push up, then Bruno won't be sort of locked into a more a rigid position. He can be a bit more fluid, dictating around the attacking areas and whatnot. So fluidity isn't a question. It's more so about what benefits the 11. And I think a 4-3-3 with this current squad will greatly benefit the system. I just don't want to see the 4-1-2-1-2 again. The diamond, the 4-4-2 diamond. I think that didn't work for Oli at all. I think he thought he was getting cute earlier on in the season, and then when he got exposed, he got absolutely railed. And that's the one shape I don't want to see.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I think the question about 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 comes down to the fact that if we sign a midfielder or no, if we are able to sign a number 6, I think we will transition to a 4-3-3. But if we're not, it's about playing the double pivot again. It's about having 2 people do a one-man job again. So I personally wouldn't want to see that happen. I wouldn't want to see McTominay and Fred being there to 2 players just playing together because one completes the other and the other completes this one. So I think it's a waste of a position where you can have a better midfielder in that position who can help in the attacking phase. But I think it boils down to the fact if we are able to sign a midfielder or not.
Right.
Yeah. So lastly, I want to ask you now, of course, like we mentioned, we've had a Peachy window, but the other teams have been rather quiet. We've had City, Harry Kane here, Jack Grealish there. Nothing done yet, but they could end up with both of them. We've had Chelsea not really being active, but Kunde here and a Haaland bid. A Lukaku bid has been rejected very recently. They've had a Lewandowski bid rejected recently. So they could end up with, and they're going for only top strikers. So they could end up with a fantastic world-class striker and Jules Kunde added to the already Champions League winning team that they have. City could add Harry Kane and Jack Grealish to a City team, which, let's face it, their second or third team could challenge for the Premier League title. What do we make of this? What happens if? Where do you see United if this happens?
I think it comes down to how well we can play our game. Look, if it goes down to the wire and we're constantly comparing player by player, we're never going to catch up. If we're looking at, like you mentioned, Manchester City, they're looking at a double swoop, picking up both Harry Kane and Jack Grealish. They don't even care. They got money coming out the butt, just dumping it, right? We're not going to match that, right? Especially right now in the current state that we're in. Maybe when Manchester City back then were getting slammed 8-0 by Middlesbrough and they had Stephen Ireland in midfield, maybe that might have been a different circumstance. But right now, the fact of the matter is that we can't match them all, player for player, pound for pound, when it comes to that kind of transfer business. So what we need to focus on more so is getting our squad right. Do I think, for example, we'll just talk about Manchester City because we brought him up. Do I think Harry Kane's going to go and slot in and pick up where Aguero left off? I don't think so. I think that team's going to have to get readjusted to Harry Kane. I think that Harry Kane's going to have to get readjusted to them. And mind you, Harry Kane is not a healthy player. That boy gets injured quite often. Yeah. So in a style with Manchester City, it's not an explosive style, but in a style that requires everything down to a T, who knows? Maybe he might not be the player that he is. I'm not trying to jinx him or curse him with a voodoo, but he might not he might not find it as easy as some people might think he is. He's a world-class striker. I think I'll give him that, but it might not be as easy. Jack Grealish, also another player coming in. Is he going to slot right in? Who knows? That's buying players is one thing. getting them acclimated to the squad is a whole different thing. That's why I think Manchester United should more so focus on just our game, just our people, our players. Players obviously are, like you mentioned, Chelsea's going to sign another striker. They were talking about Lukaku. Whether he comes or not is a whole different story. The competition is going to get, it's not going to get any easier. It's going to continue to just it's going to continue to suck. So if Manchester United are going to compete, they have to compete with the resources that they have. All he needs to improve on his technique. All he needs to improve on his coaching abilities, because last season what we were seeing, and look, we didn't have the squad, but last season what we saw, even the season before that, during the pandemic season, what we saw was an ineffectiveness when it came to squad rotation. Whether that be Ollie just completely said, look, I don't trust my squad players. Whatever the circumstances, we overexhausted Rashford. We overexhausted Pogba. Those two were injured for a very long time. And if it wasn't for Bruno Fernandes coming in that January transfer windows, Ollie might not have even had this job, because Manchester United were looking absolutely dog poo-poo in that circumstance. He comes back. They start firing in all cylinders again. And then they go through another dip, and then he has another over reliance on Rashford again, on Pogba again, and Bruno again, and Harry Maguire. These players are getting milked down to the last drop, and you don't want to see that, especially when we're playing 38 matches in the Prem, when we're playing the League Cup, when we're playing the FA Cup, when we're playing in the Champions League. That's a lot, and they're flying in between double training sessions. That's a lot. All he needs to improve that. And I think those are the more important challenges, rather than looking over the wall and saying, oh my goodness, who do they have? Or, oh my goodness, who do they have? I think more so the important thing is Ollie getting his job done the right way. This is his, third season? I don't even remember off the top of my head now. He has to do something with this team. He has to get some sort of result, whether that be winning the Prem or winning some sort of trophy. We have to see something. We saw improvements gradually. Now we're here. This is the time where he has to show up. And this is Ollie's test. It's not about him coming out into a press conference and saying, oh, Manchester City is going to be a tough competition because they signed 2 world-class players. It's more so about Ollie coming out and saying, we have this squad, we have these players, this is how we're going to get the result, and this is how we got it. That's what we want to see more in this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And just lastly, finally, I want to ask you, what do you expect out of United this season, league position-wise, and what do you think will be enough for Ollie to keep his job?
That's a great question. I've been getting asked this a couple of times in the past few weeks, obviously, in lieu of the fact that the Premier League season is about to start in a week or two. But what do I see fit for Ollie in terms of objectives? I don't think we'll be able to win the Prem, but I definitely think we still have a squad capable of challenging something, whether that be the Champions League or the FA Cup. I think an FA Cup finish or a Champions League finish with a second place, I'll take that all day. I'm not one to shoot high. As much as I'd love to be optimistic and whatnot, I don't put pressure on my player, on the way I see my players like that. So as much as I'd love for them to challenge for the title, I don't know if we're still there yet. I think it'll be easier to determine if we can challenge for the title after maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months into the season, because we'll be really able to see how they get the ball rolling. If we can get that ball rolling strong in the start of the season, who knows? Maybe the momentum can ride it out. We have no idea. I'm just going to say I'm going to be positive. I think a positive start with a good finish, whether it be an FA Cup or a Champions League, with a strong finish in the Prem, whether it be second place or third or whatever it is, a strong finish is all I ask for right now. When the transfer window closes, I might have a different expectation. After the first game, I might have a different expectation. Who knows? I just want to see improvements all around. And Champions League, it was a situation that was an absolute travesty the way we wrapped that up. That's a massive test for Ollie. I will absolutely crucify him if we show up in the Champions League and perform like that again. To have it in our hands and to just completely bottle it like that is absolutely unacceptable by any standard of imagination for Manchester United team. I don't care if you're David Moyes. I don't care if you're freaking Mick McCarthy going and managing. I don't care who you are. If you're Manchester United, you can't capitulate like that. It's too much, and we can't see that again. So little gradual progress again is all I'm asking for right now.
Yeah. So I doubt Ollie Gunnar Solskjaer is ever going to see this video, but Ollie, if you do, John says you have to finish second in the Champions League, or you have to win the FA Cup, and there's no pressure. You keep your job then. John, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure as usual. It's some great points. And again, just thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I think it's very important that we always take our time and just chat with more people everywhere around the world.
Definitely. That's it for today, guys. Do like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.